John Harbaugh reached his breaking point with penalties at Baltimore Ravens training camp practice on Saturday after another sloppy day. We talk about that, the Ravens making more moves, and so much more coming up on this bonus edition of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Ravens. Welcome into the show. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much for being here on this bonus Sunday edition episode of the show, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day, free and available for you on all podcasting platforms, including in video form on YouTube, where you can like and subscribe to the channel, and in audio form where you can follow along and subscribe as well. We are 5 days a week here, plus more on Locked On Ravens. So Monday through Friday is the regularly scheduled Monday through Friday program. Plus, we have bonus episodes like this when there are headlines to talk about. We go live after every single Ravens game, after every single piece of Ravens big news. And we also now have the Locked On Ravens watch-alongs, where we react to every single game play-by-play live. So be sure you check those out. We also have the Locked On Ravens squad show with myself, Sam Njoku, and former Ravens receiver Qadri Ismail. So if you didn't know by now, we have a lot of Ravens content here on this channel. And I wanted to hop on today and this again, it's delivering on my promise that I made at the beginning of training camp to try to get an episode out after every single day of Ravens training camp practice. So obviously the Ravens practiced on Saturday, and there are headlines to talk about. So we're diving into that. And of course, we are doing it regardless of any background technology, internet issues, which I'm working out here. I appreciate the patience on that as well. You see my lovely outline is we're going to dive into some Ravens content here. So we're going to dive into it. In the final part of the show, get into a little bit of a game, good spot and bad spot on the roster. We'll go both starters and backups on that. In the second part of the show, we'll dive into the Ravens making a couple of moves on Saturday, what those are about. And then in the first part of the show, we'll just dive into training camp updates from Saturday, particularly John Harbaugh reaching his penalty breaking point. So let's just dive into that. Sloppiness has been the name of the game here for the Ravens over the course of training camp, particularly obviously when it comes to penalties. The Ravens have been very highly penalized during their training camp practices, and it's something that is frustrating for the players, for the coaches, for the fans, for everybody. And on Saturday, that did not change. Now, Cordell Woodland over at 105.7 The Fan, he's been out at practice. He's been observing. He's been doing a great job, especially with his recap video. Shout out to Cordell for those. During his recap video practice for Saturday, he talked about how he said there were about five false starts, in a span of 6 or 7 plays. And he said that John Harbaugh got so upset, he kicked out the entire offensive line. He personally asked for Patrick Ricard. Now, this wasn't the starting group. Cordell mentioned it was the backups, the second teamers, I believe. And on another play, Lucas Scott had a false start. John Harbaugh kicked him out. And it's crazy because you kind of look at a couple of other updates from, I guess that, I don't know if it's an exchange or whatnot, but Jonas Schaefer of the Baltimore Banner kind of elaborated and said the Ravens did a nearly hockey-style line change after the second string offense's fourth false start penalty in the red zone. John Harbaugh wanted everyone but the center off the field. And then Scotty Washington ended up scoring a diving touchdown on the next play. And Brian Wacker kind of gave live updates of it at the time, like when it was going on. He said the Ravens' second team had 3 false starts and 4 plays in the red zone. And then he goes, make that 4 and 5 plays with a timeout. So, I mean, look, it's certainly concerning. It's frustrating. Is it the be-all, end-all? I would say no there. But to me, I don't want to overreact one way or the other of the training camp. But trends quickly become trends when it continues to happen. If this was like a one-off thing per week or a couple of times a week, because again, John Harbaugh and coaches have talked about, particularly with the cadences they're using, they are complicated cadences to get their guys ready, right? They want to have these guys as prepared as possible. And we know that training camp, there's a lot of discourse about training camp, where what are guys working on? But John Harbaugh clearly extremely frustrated with this whole thing. And, at this point, it happens so often for them, whether it be in certain moments with the first stringers, the second stringers, the third stringers. it continues to stack. And I think that is the most frustrating part of it all. And I get it. I mean, it's difficult, especially when we saw how the Ravens performed with penalties last season. They were the second most penalized team in the league, had the second most penalty yards during the season. And Harbaugh was asked about it, and he said that was kind of early in practice. We had like 3 or 4 or something like that. So we started over. The next period, I think after that, we yanked them all. So that's what we did. It seemed effective. They cleaned it up after that. Did you notice? It seemed like it worked for the most part. So yeah, John Harbaugh was like, you know what? If this is not going to work, we are going to make it known that it's not going to fly. And of course, they made that known from the jump, right? But it's about having that. And then Jonas Schaefer actually asked a question to Harbaugh about what happened to making guys run laps for false starts. And, Harbaugh said, we've done it before. There are a lot of options. We could have had them do log rolls. We've had them do that in the past. That was more in college, and then talked about stadium steps. There aren't enough steps out there that would make it worthwhile, though, he said. So he said that up downs are also a good punishment drill. He said there are a lot of up downs that they could do. So Harbaugh said they've got lots of good options. So clearly, again, Harbaugh is trying to exhaust everything to try to get these guys to be more in rhythm, in timing with each other. Because, again, penalties just demolish drives, not in a good way. And I use this example all the time. What if Derrick Henry runs the ball on 1st and 10, gets 9 yards, puts the Ravens in a really good spot in 2nd and 1. Then all of a sudden, nope, there was a holding call. Now you're back to 1st and 20 instead of 2nd and 1. It changes outcomes. It changes outcomes of drives, changes outcomes of games. You want to be as on your P's and Q's as possible when it comes to that. And so, they still have time. The season doesn't start for about another month. So, it's not like the season starts today and the Ravens have to be on it today, but, it doesn't make it any less frustrating there. So, again, they're working on stuff, but it does just get repetitive after a certain point. Also, Cordell saying not the sharpest practice for both Lamar Jackson and Rashod Bateman. This defense is going to be really good, by the way, just based off of everything that's going on, both out on the practice field at training camp and obviously what we saw from the Ravens defense in that week 1 game against the Colts in the preseason. Said that for Bateman, he struggled to catch the ball, got a little upset when he didn't get a pass interference call, it felt like. So Bateman was not great on Saturday, it sounds like. And then for Lamar Jackson, he threw a few interceptions, a few passes that he'd like to have back. Nate Wiggins bounced back, and he got an interception over on Lamar Jackson, which, good for Nate. I know that Nate definitely needed that. I know people have been on Nate about he's been in every highlight drill and every highlight play. It's been a little rough for Nate in that department, but good to see him get there. Chidobe Awuzie also picked off Lamar Jackson during 11-on-11s. That was near the end of practice. He actually undercut Tylan Wallace to make that play, and these updates coming from Ryan Mink over at BaltimoreRavens.com. Undrafted rookie cornerback Marquise Robinson also had an interception during one-on-one drills on a deep ball from Lamar Jackson intended for Tez Walker. And the thing that happened after it, Ryan made a point to say that Lamar ended up giving Tez some pointers after the play. He was communicating with Tez about what he wants to see on the route. This is the type of leadership that Lamar Jackson shows. Really, we hear about it a ton. Like, he is communicating with these guys. He's figuring out, all right, what do you see? What do I see? Let's combine. Leadership, and I've said this, leadership is not always about just being the rah-rah guy, right? It's not about being the, let's get this thing, let's go. It's not the Ray Lewis. It's not the Roquan Smith. Like, yes, that is a form of leadership. It's a form of it. But Lamar Jackson, he's not that type of leader, but that doesn't make him not a good leader. He displays it in so many other categories and so many other aspects, including this. We've heard Zay Flowers talk about it. We've heard Rashod Bateman talk about it. Derrick Henry has talked about it. Lamar has talked about his evolution as a leader. So good to see that even on a sloppier day for Lamar in terms of turnovers and throws he'd like to have back, apparently he was still doing his best to get as much work in as he could, as much positive work in as he could. A couple of other updates from training camp. Mentioned Scotty Washington's play with Bo Braid. That was a good play from Cooper Rush, and apparently Cooper Rush had a good day throwing the ball. Obviously, the backup quarterback spot or spots have been a very controversial topic of conversation after what happened in that week 1 preseason game. And John Harbaugh kind of got pretty honest about it after the game in general, but he also talked about it in a little more detail. Again, seems to be totally fine with Cooper Rush with, kind of what happened there. Didn't really see a lot of him, but Devin Leary, he was honest about Devin Leary after the game. He was even more honest about it after practice on Saturday. He kind of said, without saying it's unacceptable, he essentially said that it was unacceptable. So, talked about that for Devin Leary. He just didn't have a good day. I'll be the first to tell you that. You have to bounce back. You have to come back today and have a good day, which he did. So that's just football. And then he also talked about the receivers and said, how many chances did they have to catch passes? They're evaluating the blocking. You can evaluate the route running, but how do you evaluate them when they don't get passes thrown or accurately thrown or whatever? And it's impossible to evaluate that part of it when that happens. So he said, you go, wow, that's kind of shocking to throw for that few yards. So I hope we never see that again. And that's the point I was making on the watch along, the instant reaction show, the squad show, the day after show. We do a lot of shows here on Locked On Ravens, but I said, these receivers deserved better from these quarterbacks, right? They deserved better. Dayton Wade, Keith Kirkwood, LeJontay Wester, Tylan Wallace, Anthony Miller, that list goes on, obviously. But those guys didn't get an opportunity to showcase their game in a game that is meant for them to showcase their skills. That, to me, is unacceptable. And, you're really hoping that they can get more opportunities coming up in week 2 of the preseason. Coming from the second part of the show, we'll wrap up training camp updates from Saturday and then get into the Ravens making some more moves. They signed a couple of guys and placed someone on injured reserve. So stay tuned for that. A lot coming your way on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So when in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. And for me, a financial goal I've been really meaning to get serious about, it is my savings. And me being able to save, that's really important to me. And Monarch has helped me with that journey. I've looked at my spending before and been surprised at how fast it adds up. And what makes it really easy is that having everything in one app is great, especially to manage your money on the day-to-day, because I've wished before I could just have all my accounts and spending in one place. Monarch is just great. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. This episode is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. It's the best time of the year. NFL kickoff is almost here, and that means fantasy football season is back in full swing. And this year, Yahoo Fantasy is turning things up with a fantasy football experience like never before. This year, me and Locked On Ravens are playing on Yahoo Fantasy, and you should too, whether you're a first-timer or a veteran making your millionth league. One of my favorite features, new guillotine leagues, they just dropped, and every week the lowest scoring team is eliminated, and the last one standing wins. So whether you're all in on something new or you like sticking to head-to-head leagues or just jumping into public leagues, Yahoo's got you covered. Celebrate 28 years of fantasy football greatness. Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days throughout August. To kick it off, they just dropped Yahoo Fantasy Guillotine Leagues, that kill a new way to play fantasy football on Yahoo, where the lowest scoring team gets eliminated each week until there's one team left standing. With the season around the corner, now's the time to get your league together and give this new mode a try. If you're more into the classics, you can still play in head-to-head private leagues or join a public league. Stay tuned for more killer announcements and start playing Yahoo Fantasy Football now at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. We're back here on Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher with you on this bonus Sunday edition episode. Ravens content, Ravens football, we have it all here on Locked On Ravens. So be sure to hit the like and subscribe button in video form and audio form. Be sure to tell a friend, tell a family member as well that we have them covered, just like we have you covered over here on Locked On Ravens. And thanks so much to all the everydayers, the first-time listeners. If you're somewhere in the middle, thank you as well. The communities we've built up are absolutely unbelievable. Coming up on my 6-year anniversary, that's going to be on Tuesday. So really pumped for that. It's been awesome covering this team. It's going to continue to be awesome covering this team. Hopefully a Super Bowl winning team this season. But let's wrap up training camp updates from Saturday. The Ravens, and I mentioned Nate Wiggins earlier, had the interception on Lamar Jackson, but Jonas Schaefer making a point about Nate Wiggins and how he really bounced back. He said after an iffy stretch earlier in the week, Nate Wiggins is having a really impressive practice, locked up the Ravens ones in a red zone one-on-one, had a Mutombo block on a fade PBU, and picked off Lamar Jackson in the back of the end zone like we talked about. So that to me was awesome. But then there was a drill at the end of practice. I want to talk about this here to kick off the second part of the show. There was an O-line versus pass rush drill to end practice, and looked like the pass rush apparently won most of those reps. But there was one where Ronnie Stanley, it was on Calvin Noy, I believe. That was the guy that I think Ronnie Stanley got the best of. At least that's what people are saying. And then Ronnie Stanley did a little celebrate seatbelt sword, which, by the way, Jaire Alexander, I want to clear up the air on this as well. It is a sword. Jaire Alexander, the celebration where, he goes up and then he goes, bam, just brings it down. It's a sword, not a seatbelt. He actually cleared that up during the Ravens game on Thursday, where he said it's a sword. Think about it. We're gladiators. Every gladiator needs a sword. So for those who are thinking, man, seatbelt, strap them up, strap them in, lock them up, whatever it is there. No, Jaire clarifying that he's sheathing the sword when he's coming down with a celebration like that. So a lot of the team has picked up on it. A lot of the team is doing it. It's been really good to have Jaire in Baltimore. I'll say that. So you think that the Ravens, the vibes last year were just off. I've said that before. Like, they were just off in terms of they had a lot more drama than really we'd seen in a while, with obviously the Marcus Williams, Eddie Jackson, Deontay Johnson, after the season with Justin Tucker's thing, like just a lot of not on the football field stuff. And, the Ravens this year feels like all that's washed away and the vibes are all the way back. Malik Ham, during this drill at the end of practice, he had back-to-back sacks, and Mike Green, been talking about Mike Green a lot lately, he was too much for Carson Vincent on one rep as well. Tavius Robinson, he won on a rep against Joe Noteboom. He won with an outside speed move, which was cool, and looks like Travis Jones also was able to get a win there. And yeah, Ronnie Stanley, he got that win. Charlie Kohler apparently was getting in people's faces after the O-line would win the reps. So yeah, all in all, you get to see kind of what you're working with there. So that was another highlight of practice. Other than that, apparently LeJontay Weister continued to be a really tough cover in practice. DeAndre Hopkins, he's starting to come on. Well, he's been pretty good throughout the entire course of camp, albeit for maybe a couple of surprise drops or surprise drop here or there. But he apparently continues to make back shoulder catches look easy. Bill Braid, he ripped away a fumble from Tez Walker. So Teddy Buchanan, he scooped up a fumble because the offense recovered the first one, so the defense pried the ball loose again, and Teddy Buchanan was able to get that one. So again, defense prioritizing turnovers, or at least as many chances, shots on goal, right? That's kind of the mentality the Ravens have had this year. Apparently Zay Flowers was very good in practice on Saturday, twisted Marlon Humphrey up after a catch, and Marlon just went over to him and gave him a little head tap, congratulations, head tap on his helmet. So that was good. Malaki Starks, he came up and delivered a hit on Mark Andrews to break up a pass. So again, you get a lot of positive updates, but obviously the story continues to be and will continue to be the sloppiness of the penalties and all of that until it does get fixed, or at least until you're having like one or two a practice, not 4 or 5 on, 6 or 7 plays or back to back, like that stuff. And again, this practice obviously was noted it was the second stringers, so it wasn't a first string problem, but they've had it with the first stringers too. So just feels like a overall pretty big team problem that they need to be able to fix. But let's get into the moves the Ravens made on Saturday. Obviously, the one that everybody probably knew was coming and is the most unfortunate one of the three is that Bilal Kone, the rookie, he is on injured reserve. Obviously, tore up his knee in the preseason game against the Colts, ACL, MCL, and, his season is done, which you feel so bad. You feel so gutted. And, watching it live and, my reaction is on the watch along. I just kept saying, like, man, I'm praying that it's not as serious as it looked. And in those moments, you do wish that. But in the back of your mind, you just think, man, that looked really, really, really bad. And he played well. Like the rep he had where he got injured, that was a good rep. He was playing well, apparently was having a strong training camp. And, to have a moment like that end in heartbreak, your first NFL action, you have to feel for him. So obviously I'm wishing him a speedy recovery. In his place, the Ravens ended up signing MJ Devonshire out of, he was a rookie last year, 7th rounder from the Raiders out of Pittsburgh. and he had a team lead 4 interceptions that year, 10 pass breakups. He does not have an NFL stat. He was on with Carolina last year, so the Raiders waived him in April. Was picked up by the Panthers, and then he actually was placed on IR after being waived due to injury. Now the Ravens signed him, so we will see how that works. Devonshire is a move that it's fine. There are still other guys out there. You could have signed a couple of other players, but it feels like the Ravens just really wanted a depth piece. Guys also not out there. TJ Tampa was not out there. Keaton Mitchell was not out there, and Longer Beam as well. Now, Rashid Ali was practicing, which is kind of like the opposite of what John Harbaugh said during his post-game press conference, where it's like Rashid Ali got banged up, going to have to reevaluate the running back position. It was actually Keaton Mitchell who was the one that got banged up. And, he said that John Harbaugh said that Keaton Mitchell, TJ Tampa, not dealing with long-term things or anything like that. I guess his standard classified camp injuries, or I guess in this case it was preseason injuries, but the Ravens did still make a move at running back with this because Derrick Henry's not going to play in the preseason. Justice Hill likely not going to play in the preseason. Keaton Mitchell's injured. You don't want to risk that. So at this point, Marcus Major, he is still with a concussion. Ali, I guess, did get hurt but was banged up but was practicing. So I don't know that situation. So the Ravens ended up signing Myles Gaskin, a running back who out of Washington. You might have heard of him. He was a pretty high-profile guy coming out of school, didn't get drafted that way, was a 7th rounder, but he spent his first 4 years in Miami, ended up going to the Rams, spent the last 2 years in Minnesota. His best year came in 2021 when he had 173 carries for 612 yards and 3 scores. He also can catch the ball out of the backfield. He has 102 catches for 712 yards and 6 touchdowns as a receiver over the course of his career. Just a depth piece, right? I mean, D'Ernest Johnson is there. He got the lion's share of the carries on Thursday night against the Colts. So, you assume that that's going to be the case again, or at least he can split time with Myles Gaskin here. So again, just depth moves. I would expect one, could even be both, of D'Ernest Johnson and or Myles Gaskin on the practice squad. And that's me assuming Ali doesn't make the roster and might get claimed elsewhere. If Ali does clear waivers, I assume the Ravens put him on the practice squad there. So Ravens making 3 moves. They've made a lot of those moves around the margins over the course of the last week or so, and that's just the name of the game here. So we might even see more of those moves over the course of next couple weeks or so. But coming up in the final part of the show, we're going to be doing a little bit of a game here, talking about where the Ravens are in a good spot and a bad spot on their roster, both with the starters and the backups. So stay tuned for that. A lot coming your way on the show. First, this show is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Time to fuel up and turn it up with 5 Hour Energy Transfusion. It brings the bold grape, ginger, and lime flavor of your favorite golf drink, minus the alcohol, into a quick, energizing shot. Whether you're singing birdies, you're just making memories with friends, this one's a hole-in-one for your energy game. Let's be honest, some days on the course or off of it, you just need that extra boost to stay sharp and energized. And I come from an avid golf family. I have seen ridiculous shots on a golf course, hole-in-ones, the whole 9 yards, and 5 Hour Energy, that boost you get is a game changer. Golf's all about good times and good people and good flavors. Of course, the grape ginger lime flavor gives you the best parts of your clubhouse go-to without chasing down the bev cart. If you go to 5hourenergy.com today, that's the number 5hourenergy.com. You can use my promo code LOCKEDONGOLF to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. Whether you're meeting up with friends or trying to turn 18 holes into 36, get the energizing boost you need to power through. Order transfusion flavored 5 Hour Energy shots today. Back on Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher still talking with you here on this Sunday bonus edition of the show. Appreciate everybody for being here. Hope your weekend has gone well so far. And the Ravens, they kick off their preseason with a win in week 1. Obviously, they will come back in week 2 on Saturday for another game. We'll have all the breakdowns on everything there. You can catch the watch along live during the game. You can catch the instant reaction show right after the watch along. You can catch the Ravens squad show right after the instant reaction. And then we'll have an episode in the morning. So we got a whole bunch of Ravens content. That's what we do over here on Locked On Ravens. let's get into a good spot, bad spot game here. Where are the Ravens in a good spot? Where are they in a bad spot? Now, if I were to just go down the roster with just like the star players, it'd be a good spot in every single position, right? So that's not fun. We got to make it a little more in-depth than that. So we will go into backups as well and depth pieces as well. And we'll kind of dive into it a little bit. And as the game goes on, we'll get a feel. And if you're in the comments with us on YouTube in video form, if you're listening in audio form, be sure to tell me where you are on the roster right now at certain positions. I'm curious to hear everybody's thoughts on that. So let's get into my thoughts here. Let's start. We'll just go down the list. Quarterback is the first one. Obviously, the starter is Lamar Jackson. I'd say that's a pretty good spot to be in. Maybe it's controversial. No, I'm kidding. Obviously, you're in the best spot, in my opinion, at the quarterback position with Lamar Jackson there. Now, the backups, I do truly think you're in a pretty bad spot. Like, not even just a bad spot, a pretty bad spot. Now, Cooper Rush in a vacuum is a high-level backup. He has not really shown that consistently enough throughout training camp. And, obviously the preseason game, we didn't really get to see a ton of them. But, even still, that action, still, he had an interception and the whole nine there. So, I'd like to feel more confident in it. I'd also like to see Cooper play in week 2 before I make like a actual opinion of where I am on him, because he didn't. Like, Harbaugh is correct. He did not play a ton. So I would like to see that. Devin Leary, on the other hand, he played a lot and it wasn't good. And I don't think he's a fit for the Ravens. I don't think he's a fit for this roster or the practice squad. I just think he could bounce back in week 2 and 3, and I'd probably still feel the same way, where he doesn't have a spot on the roster. Maybe he's a backup practice squad guy. Like, that's where I see it for him. The Ravens have kept 3 quarterbacks at times. They have the emergency quarterback rule now. They didn't have a couple of years ago. So, at this point, I would say you probably just keep 2 quarterbacks on the roster and you move along there. Running back starters, Derrick Henry, great spot. Great spot to be in. Again, one of the best spots you can be in the league. And same thing with the backups. I think this is the best running back room in football, like, truly to me, with Justice Hill, Keaton Mitchell, Rasheen Ali. You've added a couple guys to that as well. Like, they have a star, like the star of stars, and then you have the depth behind them to really complement them. So I think they're in a really good spot there. Fullback, one of the best spots, if not the best spot in the league. We're off to a good start here on this game. Fullback, one of the best spots in the league. Patrick Ricard is incredible, fits what the Ravens do, and, has been steady and a great force in that backfield. No backup there, so, we're not going to dive into any of that because there's nothing to dive into. Wide receivers, starters. We'll go 3. Zay Flowers, Rashod Bateman, DeAndre Hopkins. Good spot. Good spot to be in. It's not a Jamar Chase, T. Higgins duo, but young, up-and-coming, ascending wide receivers plus a veteran that can still give you the exact skill set that you need on this roster. I think it's a really well-constructed room. And then you look at the backups with Tylan Wallace, Tez Walker, LeJontay Wester. That's also a good spot to be in. Is it the best depth ever? No. I think they could be maybe in a little better spot with it, but I still think that's a solid spot to be in, especially if Tez can take that year 2 leap. We saw the flashes from LeJontay in the preseason game, and Tylan has been steady. I'd actually like to see a little bit of a workload increase for Tylan, but again, they're in a decent spot with wide receiver depth. Not the best, but definitely not the worst. And you can even go down that list with like Keith Kirkwood, Anthony Miller, some of those other guys, Malik Cunningham. Like, they are deep with the depth. So I like that spot for them. Tight end wise, Mark Andrews is the starter. Good spot. And I know Mark is controversial right now within the Ravens fan base, but I still think he's a top 5 tight end. They're in a good spot there. Backups, best spot in the league. Isaiah Likely being a backup is insane. He's going to take a leap this year. I'm really excited for him to come back from his injury. And Charlie Kohler as well. A guy that gets overlooked with obviously how good Andrews and Likely are, but Kohler is still a very good player. Offensive line. Starters. I maybe should just split it up into the 3, right? So center, great spot. Tyler Linderbaum. Backup, honestly, not really good. Nick Samek, it's not really. Maybe Dellinger. Like, I don't think their center depth is great personally. Offensive tackles, good spot. Ronnie Stanley coming back, good. I like that for them. Roger Rosengarten, hopefully a year 2 jump after what we saw from year 1. I think that's a good spot for them. Tackle depth, better spot than center, but still not uber confident. With Patrick McCary gone, it kind of opens up a lot of holes on that in that offensive line depth. Joe Noteboom's there. Emory Jones, when he comes back, might be a swing tackle guard. So maybe, it's not the best there, honestly, as well. Guard. I'd say they're in a bad spot there. Could be worse because I think Voorhees will be good for them. So I guess that's like the positive. But Falele needs to show me something here, like he does. I think in a better scheme he'd be better. Like better scheme for him. Like the Ravens' offensive scheme is amazing, but like a better scheme for him, I think is what he needs. It's just I don't know if it's going to work in Baltimore. Obviously, he had the rough reps against the Colts, so we'll just have to see. And the depth is like, yeah, it's been Cleveland. I think it should be a competition between Cleveland and Falele, but the depth at offensive line certainly is not wonderful at this point. On the defense, you got Mike Green, Kyle Van Noy, Dafe Owe in that edge department, Tavius Robinson. That whole room is good. I mean, the starters are good. The depth is good. I really like that. D-line, same thing. I mean, Nnamdi Madubuike, Travis Jones, you feel really good at that spot there. And then, you're hoping Aeneas Peebles and Broderick Washington can take leaps. So not as good of a spot as the interior or as the outside linebackers, but on the interior, I still think it's a fine spot to be in. Inside linebacker Roquan being the starter, you're in a good spot there. Other than that, not a great spot in my opinion. They just, the guys Trenton Simpson, Teddy Buchanan just haven't really shown a bunch right now. Chandler Martin and Jay Higgins did their thing against the Colts, but I think they need a little more in the depth department there. Going to corners, great spot starter-wise, obviously, with Nate Wiggins, Marlon Humphrey, Jaire Alexander. Depth, I think they're in a great spot. Tusha W, Wuzie, TJ Tampa, longer beam. Like, you have solid options there all the way across the board. Safety, good spot starter-wise. Good spot, obviously with Malaki and Kyle Hamilton. And then depth-wise, I guess they're in a fine spot. I guess Bo Braden, Sanusi Kane, they need to show something there, but I guess they're fine. It's not great, but it's not horrible either. And then, special teams, they're in a fine spot. Obviously, a lot of uncertainty. Nick Moore, the veteran in that room, is a long snapper. And then, obviously got Tyler Loop and Jordan Stout. So I'd like to see Jordan Stout have a more consistent year. I'd like to see Tyler Loop get off to a really good start. So this roster's really good. Like, it's one of the best, if not the best in the NFL. You can see it with the stars. You can see it with the depth. So I feel confident where the Ravens roster is. They could obviously stand to add maybe another guard, maybe Brandon Sheriff. You have other options, but I like where Baltimore's positioned right now. That's all I have for you here today, though, on this episode of Locked On Ravens. Thanks so much for tuning into the show. On the way out, hit the like and subscribe button in video form. Follow along in audio form for 5 days a week plus more of daily Ravens coverage, and I'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.